Presidential candidate debates, updated numbers regarding inflation, and monster moves taking place in the market today. Let me get you up to date. Welcome back to Trades and Trends. I'm your host, Kyle. Today is Wednesday, September 11th, 2024. So election debates just took place. We had Trump versus Harris, and over 90 minutes did they kind of go at each other's throats, and it was pretty interesting. I would say it was somewhat lackluster on the policy and the financial side, which I was hoping for a little bit more of that. But they did go into a few details. Now, I watched it live, I was there for it, and I did appreciate how the commentators, how the interviewers were kind of fact-checking as they went certain statements from each party. Wasn't seeing too much fact-checking on the Harris side, so I had to go digging for some of that information afterwards to see if all of her statements were accurate or not. And if you haven't yet, I recommend you do fact check the majority of the conversation of the debate if you haven't, just because it's good to kind of get both sides and both perspectives. Now, I don't want to make this too political. I really don't want to get all that political at all. Some of the spotlight on Trump was that he really didn't highlight any of his policies and what he's wanting to do. He's already been in office. I think we already have a decent grasp of what policies that he has in mind. Largely, it's going to be increase in tariffs and applying more sanctions on countries that we're having issues with. That's kind of his method regarding his policies. Obviously, tightening the border and cracking down on illegal immigration and all that type of stuff as well, I'm sure is what is at the top of his list. Now, on the Harris side, I couldn't get a clear picture of what it is that she's focusing on. Perhaps just trying to keep growing jobs and assist wherever possible with inflation. Wasn't getting much about interacting with other countries and what she intends to do about the Ukraine and Israel situations, as well as with the border. So even though I think Trump is getting a lot of hate right now for his lack of definition of policies during the debate last night, particularly around healthcare, I think it's already pretty well known what it is that he is intending to do. Now, Harris did have some really good jabs at him, had some pretty good comments, and without the very intense fact-checking that seemed to be happening towards one candidate versus the other, it certainly made the appearance that she was making a lot more strictly truthful statements, though personally fact-checking some of those statements, they're not quite 100% accurate, but they're more or less there. Overall, again, I was hoping to just see a little bit more of the financial policy type side of things. That's what I'm interested in. I really just walked away from it feeling indifferent. It felt like Harris was just appealing kind of emotionally to people that are already sad and in despair and feeling hurt by the economy, and Trump just seemed like he kind of did his normal shtick, which is appealing to people who are upset and frustrated with bigger government. Those are my only opinions on that. Please don't take too much from that. Now, the real news that I was looking forward to was the inflation numbers that we got this morning. So I'm going to run through some of those with you. And I wanted to start with this article that I was reading on Yahoo Finance. After a hotter than expected inflation reading on Wednesday, markets have quickly moved to price in a higher likelihood that the Federal Reserve will opt for a smaller, more conservative interest rate cut at its September meeting. So perhaps you remember previously, market participants were kind of betting on a 50-point basis cut pretty strongly. And as of Wednesday, it seems now that the odds of a 50 basis point cut taking place next week has fallen from 44% down to 13%. I don't put too much weight on these metrics myself, but they're out there and people do seem to pay some attention to them. Some strategists have said that a 25 basis point cut would be a more welcome sign for the Federal Reserve, and I agree. I think the Federal Reserve is going to start off slow and small and just kind of gauge the market's reaction. They're not going to come out of the gate hot with a 0.5 or 0.75% cut and come off too aggressive, because they really don't want to see that inflation start reeling back upwards. For everyone who is asking for a 50 basis point cut, I think they should really reconsider the amount of volatility that would cause in short-term funding markets. It's just not something the Fed wants to risk. Meanwhile, the Wednesday's Consumer Price Index report showed that on a core basis, which strips out the more volatile costs of food and gas, prices in August climbed 0.3% over the prior month, well above Wall Street's expectations for a 0.2% increase. I really don't think that had all that significant of an impact either. I think these are pretty small. Even though 0.3 from 0.2% is a 50% increase higher than what they were expecting, I think that those are still relatively small numbers and aren't going to have as much of an impact as what they're suggesting. So we will have to see what the Fed ends up doing next week, of course, and how much they decide to cut by, assuming that they are going to cut. So I want to show you the numbers here. We have the core inflation rate month over month. That's what they were referring to, was the month over month change. So prior was 0.2%, forecasted 0.2%. Actual 0.3, so just the tiniest little tick up. I'm not too convinced by it. Core inflation rate year over year, flat, completely unchanged. Prior 3.2, forecast 3.2, unchanged. Not seeing anything big there. Now the inflation rate year over year, that's where we had some good data. The prior reading was 2.9%, forecasted 2.6%, came in at 2.5%. So inflation is really doing well, getting down towards that 2% target. We're only another 0.5 percentage point away. I think the Fed may certainly feel confident that it is now time to cut rates. Now, I want to show you the reaction that the markets had, because when this news first came out this morning, there was a drop. Markets did not react very positively to it this morning. We immediately saw a 0.5 percentage point get shaved off the S&P 500 index. But very shortly after that, before market session actually opened, it rallied back on up. And we can see that growth here. It got all the way back up 0.7%, all before the market actually opened. Now, once the market opened, it seemed participants had a different idea of where to take it. And they took it down, down, and down. At one point, the index for the day, I want to say, was down over 1.5%. But in total here, this move was 1.73%, almost 100 points off the S&P. So that was a monster move. But come lunchtime for Wall Street, they completely put the brakes on that and decided, no, actually, we're buying now. And it seems like perhaps that was the real move. And so as I start to scroll through time here, we can see that they just completely took it the opposite direction. It just immediately 180'd, and it went on to turn the index green and then some. So from the bottom here to the peak, it ended up rallying almost 3%, almost 155 points. Just a ginormous intraday move. If you add all that up, cumulatively, we did almost 5% for the S&P 500 today in terms of just movement alone. So there was a lot of action to be had. Just look at this move here and see what they were trying to pull off. They really sold it hard into the morning, but immediately just bounced right back on out of there. And the sellers, I think, had a pretty good possible motive in that it looked like, at least at first, that they were aiming for a new low here. So they were selling off pretty hard. The lows were approaching quickly, but Wall Street came in and just bought it all up and pushed us to intraday highs and weekly highs. And we're going on to make, we definitely even made multi-week highs. So we will see what happens from here. I think possibly now we might be looking forward to a couple trend days. So we could even be looking at getting back to this 5660, 5650 level and then go from there, which again puts us not too that far away from all-time highs. So will we be pushing back into all-time highs again here soon? I think so. I'm very bullish on markets still, regardless of what the presidential candidate and debates and all that junk has got going on. regardless of what's going on in other countries and regardless of unemployment and whatever numbers that they're trying to spook you with to suggest that the economy is about to roll over and have a big multi-decade, multi-year heavy recession. I'm not buying any of it. Let's ride out the rest of this week, see how price action continues to perform going into Thursday and Friday, and then with a little bit more economic data and the federal interest rate decision next week, we can maybe make some decisions regarding what the next month and a half or so beyond that might look like. What did you think about the debates? I'm curious to hear your opinion, and I welcome discussion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you all very soon.